This is Dr. Mary, 4 Points Family Chiropractic. Thanks for being here for our Facebook Live for December. We're focusing on posture, and I'm going to be giving you 3 secrets to the perfect posture. I know this is kind of a topic that's been talked about a lot right now. I mean, particularly in 2020, almost ad nauseum, we're talking about posture, but it's because it is a bigger sitting more and more and more. And honestly, a lot of the research about this was actually done like 20, 30 years ago, mainly because that's when work changed, right? Like that's when more desk sitting became apparent, classrooms became more sitting heavy, and that's also when telecommuting kind of became more of a process as like internet got faster and more appropriate for working from home. So this is something that's been a part of kind of cultural awareness for quite some time. But there's a lot of really good tips that you can use at home to start improving your posture pretty much right away. Um, there's 2 main muscle groups to focus on. The first one are the ones that are kind of commonly referred to as your posture muscles. So these are the things that you probably think of when you think of your posture. So it's these upper back muscles, and then here in the front, your neck muscles as well. Those get deconditioned with sitting for long periods of time. There's a great study from the Physical Therapy Journal, and it was done back in 2007. But they acknowledged that sitting distracted in a seated position will result in a reduced ability to maintain an upright posture. Now, you might ask what a distracted position is. They actually, for the study, used, when they were doing this with the people that they were studying, they actually used their jobs. So there's nothing really more distracting than your work, which any employer will be happy to know, but you are focused so much on whatever you're doing that you don't have the bandwidth to pay attention to what your postural muscles are doing unless you're putting in the work to train them outside of a work environment. So that's kind of what they're talking about as far as like being distracted. So to combat this, there's very intentional intervention that you can do. Really 1 to 2 times a day, but as much as you want. You don't need any equipment. You just need a wall. They're called wall angels. And there's a tutorial on our website. Actually, every exercise I show you today, there's going to be a tutorial on our website, 4pointschiropractic.com. That way you can pause it and rewind it. And if you have any questions, you just ask me or one of the other doctors. But you get up against a wall and you go up into the W position like this. Now, the trick is you want the back of your head pressed against the wall, your shoulder blades doing the same, your elbows and your wrists. So those pressure points are touching the wall. Picture your shoulder blades as V's like this, and you want to imagine them getting drawn down like this into your pocket. That's a good visual to have. Go into that W position, hold that for 10 seconds, then go out into the Y position, the T position, and then the L position. You want to do all 4 of those positions, 10 seconds each. I recommend 2 to 3 times a day, but it's something that you have access to kind of in your head. And you can do it if you've noticed like, hey, this Zoom meeting's gone on like 45 minutes and longer than it needs to. Get up and do some of these exercises. This particular exercise, by the way, pairs really, really well with stretching out your pectoral muscles. So if you get in a doorway and kind of block your elbow here and rotate out and stretch your pecs, that's going to be really, really helpful and complement that exercise, the wall angels, really, really well. Don't forget your neck muscles in all of this. That study from 2007, that's actually the only thing they focused on was neck muscles. They completely ignored the upper back. These muscles here in the front, when you're sitting, they elongate, and you'll hear it referred to as muscle creep. Basically what it means is that neurological signal isn't there as strong, so the muscle starts to stretch and creep out of the position that it's supposed to be. Basically, it won't bounce back to the correct position as fast or as effectively as you really need it to. So the exercise that's appropriate for that and is really easy to do is you lay on the ground, face up, you bring your chin back like that, keep your cervical spine, keep your neck neutral, and then you just raise your head off the ground. So you want to keep that chin tucked, raise your neck off the ground. You're going to feel it here in these muscles. You want to do at least 10 reps of this every day. Feel free to do more, but what you're doing here is you're building endurance muscle fibers in your neck, and that's going to start to kind of revert some of the damage that we do when we are sitting for long periods of time and you have that creep happening in the front of your neck muscles. Now, the second set of muscles is actually a little bit less obvious, and in fact, I think they get overlooked a lot, but it's your lower back muscles, your core, particularly your deep core. I think we don't think about it as much for posture because we're usually worried about, honestly, the aesthetic, right? We worry about like the rounded in shoulders, the hump back, all of that. It's important, but so much of your posture depends on a good, strong core, and that protects you long term from any sort of low back injury as well. And there's a particular thing that we look for, particularly in chiropractic, called an anterior pelvis, a forward-leaning pelvis. And in 2002, a study in applied ergonomics was looking at that particular position. And they found that in otherwise healthy individuals, if they sit for long periods of time and they have that anterior pelvic tilt, that muscle creep will set in and they'll end up having low back discomfort and problems later on down the road. So it's a little bit of a longer study that they did. And they also found that it started to impact your general mobility. Like people aren't as willing to move or as able to move, and it kind of impacts you long term that way. So there, again, are some very specific exercises that you can do for your deep core, but I would be remiss to even start talking about that if we didn't address another thing first, and that is breathing. I think this is actually arguably one of the biggest things that implements people's posture and overall kind of engagement of the core. Most of us are not breathing appropriately. And if you've seen me in the office, I've actually probably talked to you about this. I feel really strongly about breathing biomechanics. If you are part of the population, most of us, who have been sitting for hours and hours, weeks on weeks, years on years, from school to work to whatever you do at home, that sitting is going to start impacting your breathing biomechanics. Your breathing is so much more than your lung function. It's actually much more about your core. So what we depend on to take good deep breaths is a dome-shaped muscle called the diaphragm. And it comes up here over the top of your abdomen. It's actually the muscle that divides your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity. This muscle is incredibly important. When we take a deep breath in, it's letting all of the air actually come into your body. If your diaphragm's not working appropriately, not only is your core not engaging all the way, you're also missing out on some oxygenation. And it's something that we don't think about all the time, but your oxygen levels can get impacted by this as well. So if you want to check your breathing, if you want to assess it, the easiest way to do it, whether you're sitting or standing, because your diaphragm should move whether you are sitting or standing, is you put a hand here on your chest, a hand here on your stomach, and take a deep breath in. When you do that, your belly, the hand on your belly, should expand before your chest does. Most of us are chest breathers. We're using our chest, our upper back, our ancillary neck muscles to do most of the breathing process. You want your diaphragm to be doing the work. So when you take a deep breath and you're expanding into your belly first before your chest, that is an appropriate deep belly breath. These should be all of your breaths. If you want to see somebody breathing absolutely perfect, watch a baby while they're sleeping. That is a perfect breath, I guarantee you. That's what we should all be aiming for. Once you're comfortable doing that, and I would recommend doing 10 to 20 breaths to kind of build that neurological pattern, switch this hand on your chest to your lower back. You want to put it on your QL, so a little muscle here on your side. Have a hand there and on your belly, and then when you take the belly breath, try to expand into both hands. You're not going to feel this hand in the back move a ton, but it's going to expand a little bit, and that's how you're going to know that you've taken a full deep breath. When you're doing this drill, be patient with yourself. A lot of us have been having these kind of changed biomechanics for a long time, so this will take some relearning. But I recommend people do like 20 to 30 breaths like this 1 to 2 times a day. Doing them generally is important, but if you know that you are about to go move something, lift something heavy, do climbing, bending, anything like that, take the time to do these breaths first, because it is going to activate your stabilizer muscles in your lower back and your core. So if you have to pick a time to do them, that's the time. But try to do them more often. So now that you have kind of a solid breathing strategy, we're going to start addressing the creep that happens down here in your lower back and your pelvis. One of the easiest ways you'll hear us talk about a lot is pelvic tilts. So if you get a yoga ball and you sit on it and you go into flexion extension, so pelvic tilts forward and backwards, side to side, and you can do circles in both directions. These are really slow, small, intentional movements. They're not big global, you're not bouncing all around on the ball. You want to make sure they're small and intentional. 10 to 20 of those in every plane of motion, great idea to do those every day. The other exercise I love for stabilizing your low back and making sure your posture is good when you are seated in particular is called a dead bug. Again, there's not a ton of space for me to show you here, but there is a video on our website. So you basically get onto your back, you like face up on the ground, and you bring your arms straight out in front of you like this, and your legs with your knees bent. So you're basically in the tabletop position, but on your back. You look like a dead bug. It's the easiest way to put it. But when you're in that position, the first thing to do, there's kind of levels of this exercise. Take the deep breaths. Focus on engaging your diaphragm. Once you're comfortable in that position, do a cross crawl motion. So you bring one arm back behind your head and keep this one out, and expand the opposite leg and let that down. Bring them back up, and then do the opposite. So not only is this engaging those deep core muscles, it's also getting the hemispheres of your brain to talk to each other. When you do that, you're automatically stabilizing your spine by getting that cross-crawl mechanism to activate. It's very helpful for actually cognitive function as well, but this exercise is great for that. I would recommend doing 10 to 20 reps of these 1 to 2 times a day. You will notice a difference. You might even be a little bit sore. It's going to be a muscle group that you're not typically engaging, mainly because we're not taught to engage them after a certain point. So again, have patience with yourself in this particular range of motion with this exercise. The third secret to making sure that you have good posture beyond those exercises is honestly set yourself up for success. Again, we've been in these positions where we aren't in great form, great posture for a long time. And it's kind of a project to build yourself back up. But the longevity, the benefit you get from that is huge, and you see it kind of trickle down into your everyday life. So really make it easy as you can for yourself. This is, again, just like a weird time. I've had some patients, and I've seen like on the internet, people are kind of joking. They go from like their bed and they roll out and they go to their desk, and then at the end of the day, they roll to their couch and then back to the bed, and like nobody's moving right now. And I get that. There's not a ton of places to go. We all want to stay safe, but any movement patterns you can get in are a good idea. So if you take time to look at your workstation, and again, I'm sure you're hearing this a lot, but a sit-stand workstation is a great idea. This is fantastic for anybody that has to be at a computer more than a couple of hours a day. If you get a variable workstation that you can go up and down, then work your way up to standing for longer periods of time. If sitting is pretty much the only option for you, that's okay. There's ways around that. You can get like the yoga ball and sit on that, or I'm a big fan of these balance discs. If you don't have space for a ball, or if you have kids that are gonna come kick it around the room, or if you have a cat that likes to scratch things, then this is probably a good option. You can put this in your chair, pretty much any chair, and it's an unstable surface, so as you sit here, you're having to challenge your core anyway. It's called active sitting. I was actually reading recently, BMW, the car company, did some research on this as well, and actually some of their seats and some of their cars will do active sitting for you if you're doing a commute. It's almost like a game, like it challenges your core, so not that fancy. I go for the balance disc, but anything you can do to challenge your core will help you long term. I've also seen some treadmill desks, or really people are kind of hacking it. They're just putting like one of those blank treadmills and putting it under their desk. That's a nice option too, if you know you're going to be from home for a long, long time. I also want to address just generally getting out and walking. You will hear a lot trying to get 10,000 steps a day. I think what happens is some people look at that and they get overwhelmed. Like, hey, I'm barely getting 2,500 a day. How am I supposed to get it for 10,000? And they just kind of quit. I will say most of the research is actually on just a little bit more. So 10,000 is a nice goal to have for yourself, but for people who are sedentary, even increasing the amount of steps you get by 1,000 to 2,000 steps a day, so like a 30-minute walk, ends up having really big health repercussions on both your spinal health and your cardiovascular health. So consider that as well. But what really controls our posture is our visual field, those movement patterns, and of course our proprioception. Just as a refresher, those are proprioception is your sixth sense. It's how you know where you are in space. There's actually specialized nerves in our body that do this for us. And they're in our joints mostly, but they're densest in our spine actually by our discs and in our paraspinal muscles, the muscles that run along our spine. This is how we know when to move, how fast to move, what plane of motion to move in. There's a lot of biofeedback to the brain there. In our practice, what we're working on mostly with chiropractic is making sure that those biofeedbacks and that proprioceptive loop is happening appropriately. Basically, the neurology is working well. So your job is going to be to strengthen your body around it as much as you can. So those are tips that we know that you can implement right away that are going to have impact on your posture, just some things to add in. Again, I hope it's really helpful for you. Everything's on our website if you need a tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email or a comment here. If you think it would help somebody else, please feel free to share it. We want to help as many people as we can. And if there's anyone that you know that you think would have posture issues and need to get that spinal feedback and that proprioception checked, when we do these for the community, we do offer a special. So that entire exam with a doctor consult, an exam, any necessary neuro-ortho checks, and necessary x-rays, and a review of findings. That's normally $315. If someone calls in and mentions this Facebook Live and says the word posture, they're going to be able to come in and get all of that for $67. So if there's anyone you know that needs to get checked or you're concerned about their posture, definitely let us know. But again, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, just let us know. But see you around the office. Stay well.